The unrelenting virus
With
may
all of
have
you
met
at
its
home, we
match.
begin tonight
Pfizer
with
now
that
says
new
its
hope in the
vaccine
battle
is
against the
95%
coronavirus. 1
effective
week after that
and
news
safe.
from
The
Pfizer.
data just
Tonight,
days
news
away
on a
from being
second
submitted
vaccine.
to the
Moderna
FDA,
announcing its
where a
vaccine
vaccine
is
advisory...
In the past few weeks, 3 pharmaceutical companies announced positive news on their new COVID-19 vaccines. American companies Moderna, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca announced that their vaccines were highly effective in preventing COVID infection. Expectedly, Moderna and Pfizer's stock price increased following the announcement. However, AstraZeneca's stock price actually decreased. It seems puzzling. These vaccines' effectiveness surprised even the top health officials in the US. What's just as surprising is the record speed with which these vaccines were developed. Normally, vaccines involve 2 to 4 years of preclinical exploratory work to select potentially effective vaccine candidates. Then, the company will file a request for an investigational new drug with the FDA to start clinical trials. Phase 1 trials involve a small number of volunteers to determine whether the vaccine is safe. Phase 2 and 3 trials are larger scale and determine the vaccine's efficacy. Finally, FDA review of the clinical trial data and large-scale production and distribution compile the final steps before the vaccine can be administered to patients. This entire process can take upwards of 15 years. In comparison, the developmental period for the COVID-19 vaccine took less than 2 months, with some existing work from SARS-CoV-1 and MERS. In fact, Moderna claims that their vaccine was designed within 48 hours of learning the virus genetic sequence, with the rest of the time devoted to scale-up, clinical trial manufacturing, and stability testing. The clinical trial period was reduced by having overlapping Phase 1 and 2 trials before recruiting a large number of Phase 3 volunteers. Now, the companies are in the process of filing for emergency FDA approval while simultaneously performing large-scale production and distribution. The significant financial risk incurred by these companies is offset by the federal government guaranteeing payment for the vaccines as part of Operation Warp Speed, which is expected to bring a vaccine to market within 1.5 years.
Rather than injecting dead or weakened viruses, as traditional vaccines do, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines inject genetic material. More specifically, these vaccines are mRNA-based and use mRNA that encodes for the viral spike protein found on the coronavirus. When this genetic material is injected into the arm, cells in the muscle translate the mRNA to create the viral protein within the body. This approach only encodes for the critical fragment of the spike protein, giving our bodies a preview of what the virus looks like so that it may create antibodies in response, without actually causing disease. These mRNA vaccines have been desirable for fighting the COVID-19 pandemic because they can be manufactured much more quickly than traditional vaccines. Traditional vaccines require lengthy manufacturing steps, growing a hybrid version of the virus, harvesting the viral proteins, and purifying them to high medical standards, which can take weeks to perform. By using an mRNA vaccine, our bodies manufacture the proteins for us through translation of the mRNA, cutting out the lengthy manufacturing steps of traditional vaccines. Additionally, mRNA is made from chemical synthesis rather than biological synthesis, making it much quicker to be made on an industrial scale. The mRNA is encapsulated in lipid nanoparticles, or LNPs, to protect it from degradation and allow it to pass through cell membranes. The LNP has 4 components: an ionizable lipid, a phospholipid, cholesterol, and a polyethylene glycol lipid, or PEG lipid. The ionizable lipid complexes with the mRNA to form a core structure, while the phospholipid and cholesterol assist in enveloping the mRNA lipid complex. The PEG lipid protects the nanoparticle shell. These components work together to achieve cellular uptake and endosomal escape, ultimately allowing for the release of mRNA into our cells without being degraded. The AstraZeneca vaccine is more traditional than the 2 mRNA vaccines. It uses a modified cold-causing adenovirus to deliver DNA encoding for the spike protein found on the virus. This provides a strong advantage for the AstraZeneca vaccine, as it doesn't need to be kept at such freezing cold temperatures as the other vaccines, minus 20 degrees Celsius for Moderna and negative 75 degrees Celsius for Pfizer, making it easier to store in areas where freezing isn't possible. If the AstraZeneca vaccine provides this critical advantage and is just as effective, why did their stock price drop immediately after their vaccine announcement? Long story short, AstraZeneca made a mistake in their clinical trials, accidentally administering a half dose to 2,800 out of 10,000 participants in the experimental group, followed by a full dose a month later, while the other 7,200 participants received 2 full doses. Interestingly, the group that received the half dose displayed 90% efficacy, while the other displayed 62% efficacy. AstraZeneca framed the results positively, noting that the higher efficacy of the lower dose meant less vaccine was needed, especially important when the vaccine is manufactured on the scale that it is. However, many experts and non-experts alike found the results confusing. Why would the lower dose work better than a regular dose? This question cannot be answered by AstraZeneca or University of Oxford. Additionally, many criticize the decision to report an average efficacy of 70%, seeing it as clouding the results of the trial. How is the public supposed to have full trust in this vaccine when the data is confusing and shows an unexplainable phenomenon? After coming into scrutiny by the media, AstraZeneca lost public trust in their vaccine, and their stock price has reflected this. Although Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca have proven that their vaccines work, how the public views these vaccines will ultimately affect how useful they are. Without public trust in the vaccines, how will they get billions of people willing to take it? Regardless, mRNA vaccine technology and astounding speed in developing the COVID-19 vaccine will finally allow us to see a light at the end of the tunnel.